So for all the hype, a budget for growth that downgrades the growth forecast. His opening boast was that things aren't quite as bad now as they were in October last year after the kamikaze budget. And the more that he pretends everything is fine, the more he shows just how out of touch they are. After 13 years of his government, our economy needed major surgery. But like millions across our country, this budget leaves us stuck in the waiting room with only a sticking plaster to hand. A country set on a path of managed decline, falling behind our competitors, the sick man of Europe once again. This was a day for ambition, for bringing us together with purpose and intent, for unlocking the pride that is in every community, matching their belief in the possibilities of the future. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, after today, we know the Tory cupboard is as bare as the salad aisle in our supermarket. The lettuces may be out, but the turnips are in. A hopelessly divided party caught between a rock of decline and a hard place of their own economic recklessness, dressing up stagnation as stability as their expiry date looms ever closer. And the figures published today spell it out. A year of stagnation, growth non-existent. According to the IMF, the worst performing country in the G7 this year. A prediction today confirmed by the OBR, and growth downgraded in years to come. This is a failure you can measure not just in the figures, but in the empty pockets of working people right across the country. 13 years without wage growth. 13 years no better off. 13 years stuck in a doom loop of lower growth, higher taxes and broken public services. Madam Speaker, our OBR makes clear today things don't look any better in the long run. No. A broken labour market holding back our prospects. 7 million on the NHS waiting lists. Ill health and disability on the rise. And the consequences, as we've just heard, deferred to the future. The classic short-term sticking plaster cycle. Decisions cynically ducked today, pain for working people tomorrow. It doesn't have to be like this. Britain has enormous potential. On science, innovation, technology, we should be leading, not lagging. We need an industrial strategy that removes barriers to investment. And the announcements today are nowhere near the mark. The lowest investment in the G7. That's their record. All our competitors know this. They're gearing up for an almighty race for the opportunities of tomorrow. And we've got to be on the start line, not back in the changing room, tying our laces. Now, he mentioned the war in Ukraine. And of course, on this side of the House, we stand with Ukraine and we stand with the government's response to Putin's brutality. We'll look carefully at the details of the military spending announced and we will support them. But what we cannot accept is the use of the war as a blanket excuse for failure. Our economy has weak foundation. Global crisis hit Britain more than other countries. Wages in this country are lower now in real terms than they were 13 years ago. The average French family is a tenth richer. The average German family a fifth richer. Countries which face the same pandemic, countries which face the same war. And the war didn't ban onshore wind. The war didn't scrap our home insulation scheme. The war didn't run down our gas storage facilities. They did. Decisions which hurt working people battling the cost of living crisis right now. It's been the same story for the whole 13 years. Always the sticking plaster, never the cure, and today's budget does nothing to change that. Again, we see a failure to grip the long-term challenges. No.
Order! People shouldn't just be speaking while the Leader of the Opposition is delivering his response. They should be listening. Now, we will now listen to the Leader of the Opposition. Sir.
Today's budget changes nothing. Again, we see a failure to grip the long-term challenges. no determination to create growth which unlocks the potential of the many. Working people being made to pay for Tory choices and Tory mistakes. Madam Deputy Speaker, these are the organising principles of Conservative economics. Judge them by their choices. The running down of our public services, paid for by working people. The disaster of the Tory mortgage premium, paid for by working people. The opportunities still missed for a proper windfall tax, paid for by working people. That's what makes the Chancellor's boast about lower inflation so ridiculous. The idea that it's a tax cut. British people can see through that. They see their tax burden at its highest level for 70 years. And they know it's not the government that's lowering inflation, it's working people, earning less, enjoying less. It's their sacrifice that is helping to bring inflation down. And they deserve better than another cheap trick from the government of gimmicks, making them pay whilst trying to claim the credit. And even with the price guarantee, the average energy bill has doubled in 18 months. Because of their recklessness, the average mortgage payment is up £2,000 a year, a massive hit to living standards, however they cook the books. And yet, still, no real ambition on industrial strategy. No real ambition on the clean energy that will give us cheaper bills. No real ambition on house building. The same old Tory choices. Sticking plaster politics, no growth for the many, working people pay. And let's turn to his policies on the cost of living. Madam Deputy Speaker, I say his policies because there's a history to this, a pattern. Over the course of the whole cost of living crisis, time and again, it's Labour who bring the government not just to its senses, but to our position. Who first pushed for the energy price guarantee? Labour. Who first called for a proper windfall tax? Labour. Who first stood by people on prepayment meters? Labour. And who first said we should freeze the price guarantee this April? Labour. And we can go on, because it's also Labour that first committed to extending the fuel duty cut, a policy that in January he dismissed as part of a dossier that he published. So, for one poor soul in their research team at least, this really is a back-to-work budget. And a word of advice for the Chancellor as he promotes this policy in coming days. Use your own car, and for heaven's sake, make sure you know how to use a debit card. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, a budget is not just about the choices made, but the choices ignored. Britain needs more than certainty for growth. That's the least we should expect. We need change, stability and success. Anyone listening to this and worried about NHS waiting lists, it's about crime going unpunished. They don't want to hear about the waiting list. They don't want to hear about the crime going unpunished. House building rates falling. Don't want to hear about that either, I suppose, do you? They will have heard very little that makes them feel hopeful about our future. They could have used sensible taxation policies on non-DOMs or oil and gas companies and made the money work for working people, tackled the vested interests that gum up our planning system and shown real ambition on the investment we need to turn us into a green growth superpower. And that was the test today. Can we move beyond the usual sticking plaster solutions, set a new direction for growth that serves the interests of working people? But I'm afraid the verdict on this budget is clear. They won't offer change because they can't. And so our course is set. Managed decline, Britain going backwards, the sick man of Europe once again. That's the Britain they've created, and they should look it in the eye. Because today's figures on growth put their failures up in lights. After 13 years of Tory sticking plaster politics, 13 years of no growth for the many, 13 years of being asked to pay, working people are entitled to ask, am I any better off than I was before? And after 13 years, with no excuses left, nobody left to blame, no ambition or answers. The resounding answer is no, and they know it.